Judy, the protagonist of Zootopia, is a fascinating character to analyze. Although the film might seem lighthearted at first glance, it tackles deep social issues that closely mirror our reality. Zootopia is portrayed as the city where anyone can be anything. It's a promise built on hope, inclusion, and freedom. But when we look closer, we realize that this idea is far from entirely true. Judy's own journey exposes that contradiction. She becomes the first bunny to join the police force, a space dominated by large, strong animals, and is immediately met with resistance. Her colleagues don't respect her. The chief, in particular, doesn't believe she's capable of doing a good job, simply because she's a bunny. Judy joining the force represents a major shift in the system. For change to happen, someone had to go first, and she did. That becomes even more powerful when we consider where she came from. Her family was so used to the idea that bunnies should just stick to carrot farming that they even had a motto: "We don't try so we never fail." A piece of advice that, while sounding protective, is actually paralyzing. A fake comfort zone disguised as wisdom. It's impossible not to draw parallels with real life. How many people do you know who never even try just because they're afraid to fail? Or worse, afraid of what others might say if they fail? That fear doesn't come from nowhere. It's often planted over generations by a society that keeps trying to push us into specific roles, even when those roles don't reflect who we really are. Judy refused to accept that. She trained hard, pushed herself, broke limits, and graduated top of her class. Even so, her worth was constantly questioned by people in higher positions. And that's more common than we like to admit. You can stand out, give your all, prove yourself, and still be seen as incapable because of a stereotype, because of deeply rooted bias. And that hurts. What makes Judy's story so powerful is that tension between what's promised and what's actually lived. Between "you can be anything" and "no, not you, you don't fit the mold." That's where her impact lies. She challenges that system and proves that real change takes courage, persistence, and sometimes going up against an entire system that already decided who you're supposed to be. When Judy meets Nick, their relationship brings something really interesting to light. They're like two sides of the same coin. Both are shaped by societal expectations and prejudice, but they respond to it in completely different ways. Judy was never taken seriously for being a bunny trying to be a cop. Nick, on the other hand, had always been a good guy deep down. But from a young age, he was pushed into accepting the label others put on him. The logic is simple and painful. If everyone expects a fox to be dishonest, why would he bother proving otherwise? The world had already made up its mind about who he was. So he adapted. He accepted the label and started behaving the way people expected him to. Not because it was in his nature, but because it was the easiest path, or maybe the only one left for him. That's what makes Judy and Nick's relationship so powerful. They complement each other even though they come from different backgrounds. Both face the same oppressive system, but from different angles. Judy tries to prove she can be more than what people expect, while Nick protects himself by becoming the role he was forced into. This dynamic between the two is one of Zootopia's strongest elements. The film uses an animal world to help us see human issues more clearly. By showing prejudice between species, sizes, and stereotypes, it invites us to reflect on the divisions that still exist in our society. Sadly, often rooted in race, ethnicity, social class, and more. Without needing to spell it out, Zootopia makes it clear. These judgments are social constructs that limit, exclude, and hurt people. And the film does this with rare sensitivity, making its message accessible even to younger audiences. Precisely because deep down we all know how real this is. One of the smartest things Zootopia does is portray prejudice not just as something characters suffer from, but also something they carry, sometimes without even realizing it. And that includes Judy. Even though she's a victim of bias for being a bunny trying to become a cop, she also has her own deeply ingrained prejudices, especially toward foxes. Since childhood, Judy had a bad experience with a fox, and that left a mark. She tries to convince herself that not all foxes are the same, but in practice she still harbors distrust, and it shows throughout the story. When her parents give her a fox repellent, she doesn't question it. She just takes it with her. And even after meeting Nick, after working alongside him and inviting him to join the force, that prejudice is still there, hidden beneath the surface. This becomes especially clear during the press conference scene when Judy, without realizing it, reinforces the stereotype that predators are dangerous due to their biological instincts. that comment hits Nick hard. He's heard that his whole life. Since he was a kid, he was told that being a fox meant being naturally sneaky and dangerous. When Judy repeats that idea, even without meaning to hurt him, it reopens a deep old wound. And he has every right to be hurt. The scene where he gives back the recorder and walks away is powerful because it shows that trust, once broken, is not easily rebuilt. And Judy didn't just hurt Nick. Her words affected every predator in the city, even those who had always been kind and never posed a threat. Clear example is the big, donut-loving officer at the reception desk. He's a predator, but he's never been aggressive. Till he's removed from his post out of fear. That's the domino effect of prejudice. One person speaks, society reacts, and the ones who suffer the most are often those who did nothing wrong at all. This moment in the film is incredibly powerful. Judy is forced to face her own bias. She starts to realize that she's been defending some while accusing others, all based on generalizations. The very same thing that was done to her. When she tells Nick, "You're different," she doesn't notice that she's actually reinforcing the idea that others like him are the problem. It's the same as saying, "I'm not prejudiced, I even have a friend who's insert group here," not realizing that this kind of comment actually just confirms the bias. Judy does mess up, and that's essential to her growth as a character. After that press conference, she sees that the people who had helped and supported her, the predators who had always been kind, were pushed aside, unhappy, or even targeted. The city fell into chaos. Trust between groups was shattered. Zootopia became a place of fear and division. And all of that happened because of something she said, thinking she was just reporting facts. She had no idea that behind all the turmoil was someone no one suspected. The sheep, who turned out to be the real villain, a figure that seemed soft and harmless on the outside but manipulated everything using fear and prejudice, showing that sometimes danger comes from the place you least expect. In Zootopia, the tension between predators and prey is one of the story's main themes. And while both sides judge each other, it's clear that foxes, like Nick, suffer a much harsher form of prejudice. The distrust is almost automatic. No one seems to trust a fox, no matter what they do. One particularly striking example is when Judy is reporting a case and the police chief reacts with, "Your only witness is a fox?" As if that alone makes the testimony unreliable. The message is clear. Foxes aren't to be trusted. They're seen as naturally sneaky, dishonest, and manipulative. And Nick deals with that constantly, even when he's doing the right thing. Now, just to be clear, I'm not excusing the fact that Nick spent most of the movie running scams. That's obviously wrong. But the deeper issue is that he became that way because he was conditioned to believe he would never be truly accepted. The world had already labeled him as a threat, so he simply stepped into the role they created for him. That reveals a much deeper layer of his character, and makes us think about how many people in real life end up doing the same, simply because of a label they never asked for. Now, being totally honest, Zootopia isn't my favorite movie. I've never been a huge fan of stories told exclusively through animals. Might sound contradictory, but my favorite Pixar movie is Ratatouille. And yes, it stars a rat, but the difference is that the world of Ratatouille is also populated by humans. That makes it easier for me to connect with the characters, their conflicts, and their relationships. But that doesn't mean I don't like Zootopia. On the contrary, the film is visually stunning, full of detail, and carries a strong, well-executed social critique. The way it portrays different species, behaviors, tastes, and personalities, while still showing how prejudice persists even in a so-called evolved society, is something that truly deserves recognition. Because in the end, despite all the technology, structure, and apparent harmony, they're still animals. And that holds up a pretty powerful mirror to us. One of the most brilliant choices in Zootopia, and one that not enough people talk about, is the reveal that the villain is, in fact, a sheep. Might seem like a simple twist, but it carries massive symbolic weight. I'll admit in my case, the impact was a bit lost because I'd already gotten the spoiler, tragic, right? But even so, there's no denying how well the character was built. The most interesting part is how both the audience and the characters in the movie are manipulated by appearances. From the very beginning, the sheep figure is carefully constructed as a symbol of innocence. During Judy's police academy graduation ceremony, for example, she stands beside a sheep, and the image immediately conveys sweetness, gentleness, fragility. Such a deeply ingrained stereotype that no one questions it. Sheep are always seen as pure, angelic, harmless, and that's exactly why no one saw it coming. And here's the writer's masterstroke, turning that image of meekness into someone who orchestrated an entire plan of control and manipulation. While everyone was busy suspecting the predators, the real mastermind behind the chaos was someone completely unsuspected. It's a classic role reversal, turning the monster into someone you'd least expect. And in this regard, Bellwether's character is both dark and brilliantly written. Yes, she was oppressed, especially by Mayor Lionheart, the lion, a powerful figure who constantly belittled her. But instead of breaking the cycle, she became exactly what she claimed to despise. Someone who oppresses, who spreads fear, who manipulates the narrative to gain power. And the worst part? She wasn't going after dangerous predators. She targeted completely innocent, peaceful animals, ones who had never harmed anyone, all so that prey could rise to the top of the social hierarchy, a revenge disguised as justice. It's like she was saying, since no one ever gave me power, I'll take it, even if I have to become what always destroyed me. And that's heavy. It shows that the hunger for control doesn't belong to one species. It comes from frustration, resentment, and the need to retaliate against an unfair system. And you know what makes it even more unsettling? The fact that Bellwether is exactly the kind of character no one suspects. That hits close to home. How many times have we seen real-world stories about people who seemed incredibly sweet, friendly, totally above suspicion, and who were hiding something much darker? You watch documentaries or crime reports and hear neighbors or coworkers say, "But they seemed so normal," or "I never imagined that coming from them exactly." Sometimes projecting innocence is the most dangerous mask. That's why I love this kind of villain reveal in stories. Villains like Ernesto de la Cruz, for example, in Coco, follow the same path. Characters who sell themselves as symbols of goodness and success, but are actually hiding terrible truths. And that makes the reveal hit even harder. Even though I already knew the spoiler, there's no denying it. Making the sheep the villain was a brilliant move, and honestly, I was really mad at her. She's the kind of villain you just can't wait to see exposed. Because what she did was cruel, unfair, and dangerous. She didn't want equality. She wanted to become the oppressor. And that changes everything. Another thing that barely gets talked about, and really should, is the role of Mayor Lionheart. Yep, the lion. He's an extremely arrogant figure. From the moment he shows up, you can tell he sees himself as above everyone else, including his own deputy mayor, Bellwether. The way he constantly talks over her and brushes off her input makes his superiority complex pretty obvious. But here's a detail most people miss. Even after being arrested and later released, when Judy realizes he wasn't behind the predators going savage, he comes back acting just as smug as before. No reflection, no remorse. That same pride is still intact. He even talks as if he was a victim of the situation, never taking any real responsibility. And that's where it gets interesting. 'Cause even though he's not the villain of the story, he played a major role in the chaos that consumed Zootopia. He didn't directly manipulate anyone like Bellwether did, but he was arrogant, negligent, and complicit enough to let things spiral. He created the kind of environment where prejudice could thrive. Let's not forget, he only appointed the sheep as deputy mayor because it would help him win votes from prey. And let's be real, there are a lot of sheep. It was a political strategy, not a decision based on merit or trust. He used her as a symbol of inclusion but never treated her as an equal, and in a way that helped feed the resentment she carried. Doesn't excuse her actions, of course, but it's clear he played a part in shaping that cycle. There's also a fun, and kind of creepy, detail that not many people know. In the original script of Zootopia, there was a deleted character who was afraid of sheep. Yes, seriously. She believed sheep were going to take over the world and even built a bunker to protect herself. Sounds absurd, right? But here's the irony. In the end, the biggest threat really was a sheep. That kind of plot twist is genius because it flips the usual narrative on its head. We're used to hearing a wolf in sheep's clothing, the idea of a dangerous person pretending to be harmless. But here it's almost the opposite. A sheep who turns out to be a wolf, figuratively speaking. That reversal delivers a sharp commentary on how we judge appearances and who we consider a threat in society. Zootopia is full of these hidden gems, and Lionheart, with all his king of the jungle attitude, ends up being a crucial piece of the puzzle. Not because he's evil, but because he's that kind of leader who, instead of solving problems, feeds the system with ego and neglect. And sometimes that can be just as dangerous as the actual villain. But honestly, I still think Nick has the most powerful character arc in Zootopia. Judy plays an amazing role, of course, but Nick, his story goes way beyond just becoming a good guy. It's a redemption arc, not because he was evil, but because he closed himself off after being hurt by the world. Since he was a kid, all he wanted was to be accepted. That scene where he shows up proudly in his scout uniform, so excited to fit in, is absolutely heartbreaking. He just wanted to belong, to be treated like everyone else. But what he got instead was humiliation. He was mocked and forced to wear a muzzle, like some monster about to attack. And the most shocking part? He didn't lash out. He didn't hurt anyone. He just stood there in silence, swallowing that pain. And in that moment, he realized how the world really works. That's when he decided, if they're going to treat me like a threat, then I'll just be one. The most striking part is that all of this came from children. And that's a subject many films avoid, but Zootopia tackles head-on. Prejudice and cruelty aren't exclusive to adults. Kids can be cruel too, and often they're the ones who plant the deepest insecurities in others. Childhood bullying leaves heavy scars. And in Nick's case, it's what made him build emotional armor and become exactly what the world had always expected him to be.